I don't know why I don't hear anything.
No one's talking in, don't worry.
Okay.
No one's talking in, don't worry.
We good? Okay, I call the Historic Preservation Commission meeting to order. Karen, could you do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Flores.
Present.
Commissioner Barry, not here. Commissioner Niket, not present. Commissioner Tidmore,
Here.
Commissioner Devane,
Here.
and Commissioner Young.
Here.
Okay, we all received our packet, which had the minutes for the September meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, does anyone have any comments, additions, subtractions, amendments to the minutes? The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, staff reports.
Staff reports.
Okay, do we have any visitors or public comments that are not in relation to the hearing we have tonight? None there. Unfinished business. Okay, new business. The public hearing before the Independence Historic Commission is now open for application CA-2020-08, an amendment to a previously approved application, 478 South Main Street. Applicant 478 South Main LLC. Do any commissioners need to disclose any conflicts of interest, bias, ex parte contacts, or site visits?
Yes. I mean, it's just the same thing that I've been.
Say for the record, it's-
Okay, so yes, I've spoken to Brad about the property and what he plans to build there, but I can remain unbiased in my discussion regarding this decision.
Okay, staff.
Perfect. The applicable substantive criteria upon which the case will be decided are found in the Independence Development Code, subchapter 59, Historic Preservation. These criteria are addressed in the staff report and will be read and summarized by staff during the presentation of the staff report. All testimony, arguments, and evidence presented must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the Independence Development Code, which the speaker believes to apply to this decision. The failure of anyone to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue will preclude appeal to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, based on that issue. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing on the proposal before the city. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
We will now hear the staff report.
Perfect. So this proposal, I feel like it's buzzing. One of these mics is buzzing. This application seeks to slightly amend the previously approved proposal at 478 South Main At the time of the original proposal, you will remember I noted specifically that this proposal would likely undergo some small changes just as programmatic sort of considerations were ironed out. That's what this application would do. It sort of it finalizes what the design of the building would be. As proposed, the building remains very similar to what you previously saw, right? It contains two primary building volumes that are intended to be a similar scale of the neighboring historic single-family residences. It would step back in the center portion and go taller to 3 stories. But that's exactly what our residential design standards in the historic residential area overlay are intended to do. Items that have been changed within this submittal include the addition of 4 feet to the back of the building, the enclosure of a previous colonnade that was included at the back of the building, like sort of it was a 10-foot covered area on the back of the building. The addition of a gabled dormer on the north and south elevations, the alteration of window and door locations on the back of the building, the addition of a deck on the rear of the building, the addition of windows on the south building elevation, and the removal of shingles from the upper story at the back of the building. Based on all of that stuff, you folks are really looking at those changes as part of this. The previous approval is still the previous approval. You are looking specifically at whether those changes are consistent with the historic preservation code. A couple of things just to remind you folks of as part of this. I realized that we had a couple of hearings just recently, and I didn't do a very good job of sort of defining what a hearing is like. And so just to remind ourselves, you Historic Preservation Commission, as part of this, are sitting as judges for this application. As such, you're supposed to consider this application based on the evidence before you. Also, under Oregon Revised Statute 197.307, subsection 4, the city is only allowed to consider clear and objective criteria in the evaluation of this proposal. So just be aware of that too. Some more subjective considerations such as building design or neighborhood character outside of any sort of established criteria, we just can't go there. So just remember that. Feels like.
Does that include mass?
Well, I mean, we do have established criteria for mass to
Okay.
a certain degree. So outside of those considerations, though, just be wary of that. Now, based on all of that, you folks are evaluating this under 59080 new construction in a historic district. The criteria that you folks are supposed to consider are on page 10 of your packet. So you'll note there that I said residential design standards apply to it. And the last time you folks reviewed that, I included our little checklist that we use for residential design standards. Those still apply. The consideration about a similar mass, size, and scale of buildings, you'll note my response there. Basically, based on this, because the front of the building is the same, considering the side is what you folks are considering as part of this. Those side elements that would affect the mass, the detailing of the scale, mass, and proportion on the side of the building, include filling in the colonnade, and adding 4 feet to the depth of the building, adding the gabled dormer up above, and then removing the shingles on the upper story at the back of the building. My analysis of all of those things is provided beneath that section on page 11. Basically, my conclusion was that filling in the colonnade would not do a whole lot to the overall mass of the side of the building, because ultimately it would look very similar whether it was filled in or not. It's a similar sort of mass. And then the question then becomes, what does 4 feet do to the back of the building? And that's essentially 80 square feet of wall area. Again, that because it's a 20-foot high wall, that's 80 square feet of wall area. Ultimately, that would not be adding a whole bunch of wall area to the building. Having said that, though, you'll note that the standard to define the mass scale and the scale mass and proportion talks about breaking up larger elevations through various features, be they windows or, and I can wait. Hey, that's fine.
What?
I apologize, sorry. No, this is perfect. Thank you. I've ruined enough of this.
You
Okay,
want that adjusted down?
no, this is perfect. Thanks. You can at least see. I apologize.
So basically what I was talking about is the scale and mass and proportion of the side wall, the East Street elevation of the side of the building. When I went through it, basically the conclusion that I came to was filling in the 10 by 10 area that was sort of covered wouldn't ultimately change the mass all that much, because the building itself is going to look essentially that massive, whether or not that's filled or not. And then adding the additional 4 feet wouldn't cause that much of a difference. That being said, one of the things that I did identify that would benefit the whole side elevation is to add a condition to require an enhanced covered porch on the elevation to essentially create a side porch to that side. Part of the reasoning for that is going to be a primary residential entrance to the building. The commercial entrance is via the front. The side entrance will be for residences. And so it made sense to add a side porch to that elevation just to break up that elevation a little bit more. You will note when you look at the pictures of the mass things, it says break up box-like forms into smaller buried masses using porches, windows, roof forms common on historic buildings. And so adding sort of Karen, can you show some of these pictures so I can, oh, and of course I forgot. I'm trying to sit here all this time, I forget my laser. How about that one's perfect. So you can see on this image right here, this side porch is just sort of like a shed porch, just a little thing. And so what my proposed condition would be is just enhance this porch just slightly more, at least 5 by 5, I think is what I noted, with some columns similar to the front, just to make this side elevation stand out, or to break up the side elevation in a better way. that's the condition that I recommended there. You'll note that I thought about this quite a bit. Some of the things that I considered are on page 12, just below. You'll see that I say there, in weighing this recommendation, staff has considered the following additional items. It says the proposed structure meets the design standards related to the bulk of the building within the City of Independence residential zones. And I think that that's really important. Like, if this were a standard residential building, it would meet a lot of the residential bulk requirements. That includes lot coverage of 40%. It's under a lot coverage of 40%. The lot coverage that the downtown zone actually wants is 50%. This would be under the residential maximum lot coverage allowed. Also, I considered nearby homes and how deep they extend on a lot. This proposes 64 feet. The house on the opposite corner on this side extends 78 feet. The house on the other side of the block extends 65 feet deep on the lot. Based on all of that stuff, it seems apparent that adding 4 feet to the building and filling in the colonnade is appropriate, and the standard would be met. Now, moving to the rear elevation, I did look at that as well. And it presents a very similar rear elevation. The one thing that I will note is that the original proposal proposed shingles. And Karen, if you could go to one of the attachments, that'd be great. You could go to attachment B, I think it is. Because we can see all of this stuff. Maybe it's attachment C.
It is
Attachment C.
B.
It is B.
Yeah, it's page 23.
So if you could go to page, so I mean, this shows it just fine. You can see this originally had shingles on the upper story. The proposed revision doesn't have those shingles on the upper story. What I would recommend is that those be back included in the proposal, and that you folks add a condition that the shingles for the upper story be there on the rear elevation. It just helps to break up the elevation a little bit.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so based on all of that, oh yeah, so moving on to page 13 of your staff report, then there is a discussion of height. You will note that this proposal, and if you could go to attachment, C this time, Karen. So you'll note.
Attachment, what?
You'll note that on this, I specifically called out all the things that were different. This is the original proposal underneath this, and then I just sort of put leader lines showing where things were different, right? Well, on the proposed, there's gabled ends on the upper story. And it would be great to see those on, let's see. Those on attachment A, what page is this? Page 20 of the packet. Those gabled windows, right? There's gable dormers right there and the roof line. So that is a change. So on page 13 of the packet, it identifies like, yes, this would add height to the to the building, beyond what was originally proposed. However, I will, I quoted the original staff report. You'll see it in the middle of page 13 there, where it says, the original staff report for CA 2020-08 had the following note about the requirement to step down the height of the building towards the sides of the home. The proposed distance of the structure from the neighboring single-family homes makes the step-down design important, but less essential than for other buildings that will be subject to this standard. While typical single-family homes in Independence may be separated by as little as 10 feet, their proposed structure will be approximately 40 feet from the neighboring building. So that continues to apply to this. And I will say that the gabled dormers are about 10 feet wide. There's just one gabled dormer on each side. The distance from the home on the south would actually be 90 feet. So given those items, staff recommends that the small dormers on the upper story are appropriate. They'd be small. There'd be only one on each side of the building. They'd be 38 feet from the front facade of the building, and they would be 40 feet from the neighboring structure to the north at minimum. So based on that, based on all of those things, staff thought that the design was appropriate, that it could be approved based on the standards in the Independence Development Code. And I did recommend 2 conditions specifically for the application. I did mention those when I got to them in both instances. So are there any questions about my staff report or analysis or anything like that?
I'm a little, did you have a question?
Well, truthfully, I just received mine in the mail today, and so I really haven't gone through it at all. So I can't tell you whether I have a question or not.
It doesn't, did the actual maximum height actually change, or is it just where the dormers are? It's a little higher.
It's the addition of the dormers that changed the height on the
The
sides.
overall height.
It didn't change, it changed the overall height.
It didn't change the overall height of the project. It just that one little spot.
Right.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Well, I got my packet in the mail today too, and I took a look at it. And I pulled out the original proposal that came by in December of last year to look at the back of the building. And like you had said, Fred, that you were putting lines in on certain parts of the back of the building to show things. And it does look quite a bit different with the dormers on the back from the way it was originally proposed last December. But if you're saying that doesn't really increase the height, then I guess that's okay as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So what's tough with these elevations is it's a 3-dimensional building on a 2-dimensional surface, and it's hard to picture a 3-dimensional building on a 2-dimensional surface. So that's why I'm thankful that Mr. Harris did have a perspective drawing prepared. What attachment is that? Can you show that perspective again?
You're talking about attachment B.
Attachment B.
Yes, those are very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's page 23, attachment B.
Oh, no, not that one.
Oh, the,
Attachment B, I think. Yeah.
talking about D?
B.
B, D.
D is in dog or B is in boy?
B as in dog.
B is in dog, okay.
That over.
I was just trying to figure out what
So, I mean, that sort of gives you a sense of how, I mean, it is a hipped roof building, so everything sort of slopes back from the front facade, you know, and the side. facade.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Right.
And those dormers are 38 feet from the front of the building. The
The north and
side,
south.
the north and south dormers.
Oh, okay. Attachment B doesn't show that.
And just to clarify your report, the front of the building, we're not really looking at a measurement change so much as a footprint change. Is that correct?
The front of the building has not changed at all. The side of the building is what changed. It's essentially depth, the depth of the building.
Right, but, okay, so didn't the original one have the first floor was set back and the second floor overhung? Or am I misremembering it?
That,
No, it did have a setback, and it was different in the front.
Right, so.
I'm looking at the original drawing that is in front of me from last December, and this front picture looks different than the drawing that was done in,
So
and we
basi-
approved last December.
So basically, the size of the building is still the same. Actual footprint is a few feet larger.
right, exactly.
Well, is that the 4 feet?
That's
No,
Is that-
that's on the back, the 4 feet.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that'll make okay.
But that makes me wonder about parking. I mean, we already determined that he had to keep it at the setback of the other two homes. And now we're adding 4 feet on the back. So is that gonna affect parking? Because there's gonna be businesses there. So businesses need parking as well, not just the people who are living there. So is that 4 feet across the back side of that building gonna affect the parking? Because that affects my parking.
Fred, is parking even something that we can consider in an approval or disapproval?
Parking is considered under the site design review. They propose 14 parking spaces. And they have 14, they proposed 14 dwelling units and they will have 14 parking spaces. And that meets our standards of the downtown overlay zone.
And so that is kind of a question that is not our purview, correct?
That's, I mean,
Did any other commissioners have any questions about the staff report?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
On the drawings, and I don't know, I cannot keep straight which attachment is what. So the original one, the one that shows in gray, like the color, but it's a drawing in gray, that one. It's on page 23. Yeah, that one. This one shows a lot more gables, and it just looks, it matches the homes on the block better, more closely than the new, that one. I don't know, whichever one that one is. Attachment D, like David. So.
I'm not seeing the change you're talking about.
Well,
So this one has,
a lot of metal.
oh, I don't know if it's metal or not, but these gables all match the homes next to it. And then we're missing one here. This one has a long porch. This one does not. So, I mean, this,
Can you go to the
So-
diagram behind you?
D,
Jennifer, can you go up there?
Maybe.
okay,
Okay, so the diagram we're looking at, that's the original proposal, correct?
the original one, the new one. This one has more gables, those things, and the porch is deeper and it has 3 columns. And this one does not. Like it loses some of that to me. It loses some of the craftsman look.
I think it does, it's just a different angle.
I think it's a different angle, and I think there is a difference, but I'll tell you what I think the difference is. The second floor deck enclosure is all metal railing in the new proposal. Whereas before it was like a knee wall with a small metal railing. I think that's about the only change. I agree with John. I think it's just a different perspective. It's looking different as far as the number of gables, but the second floor porches are, there's kind of a design change on that.
All the railing.
And well, it's gone to a
The
metal
railing.
railing. That kind of, it lets you look through instead of visually stopping there, and you're losing some of that. I think that's
Mass,
the difference.
yeah.
Wait, I don't know.
It has a softer, the first one
original
has
one.
the original one has a softer look to it.
It does because of the, and it's the deck enclosures.
Right.
But I don't think there's any, I think John's correct. There's no change in the amount, size, proportion of the dormers. It's just we're looking at its different angle, and even the depth of the patios and porches is all the same. But that's,
Yeah.
that one minor change is actually,
Makes a
Well, it may
difference
be a
in,
cosmetic change, but it's still a change, and it's still,
it makes a difference in how it
it makes a
appears.
difference how it's
so-
perceived from the
we're back to
neighborhood.
questions for the staff. Do we have any more?
Hello?
We're here. No. I
Oh,
don't have-
okay.
So we will now hear testimony from the applicant. Mr. Harris, you're up.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back. I'm really just here to answer questions, so. As far as the front porches that you guys are just talking about, that rendering was from a third party, so those rails and that rendering don't necessarily.
You're not married to the
I'm
open
not
house.
married to those. Those were not something that I specifically looked at changing.
Are we talking about the railings now that are in attachment D?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yes.
So, Mr. Harris, how do you feel about going ahead and putting the ones that are shingled and,
Like the old style?
yeah,
we have?
like the third, or like the original?
Condition that?
Like attachment B.
They could absolutely add a condition to do something like that.
I have no preference as far as that goes, so if you guys wanted to condition that, I would be open to that.
It just, I mean, we're gonna wanna make sure that they drain. And
Right.
I'm just thinking about it in terms of, from our building officials' perspective.
So that's what all of these changes, they are due to the original plan being somewhat conceptual still. So now at this point, deciding or figuring out exactly how the building is going to be built. And so really that's what all these changes have been. I mean, I tried to stick to exactly, I was thinking that I wasn't even coming back for more. So that's why the changes are as small as they could possibly be.
Do any commissioners have any further questions?
As long as we're not married to the metal railings, and you can make the other ones drain,
Yeah,
they
I
look
think it's-
better.
I think it's a decent point.
And
Also, the condition that Fred suggested on the end of the building, I think I'd like to do that with the,
Oh, the porch
with
on the
the
south
porch.
side.
I think it's a great idea.
I think the shingles in the back were an important feature too.
I can put those back on too. Yep.
Good.
Good.
Okay, so we will now hear testimony in favor of the application. I have several here, or two here rather. Actually, they're kind of neutral, I think. I can't quite read the last name, Elizabeth Boisvert. Thank you. I didn't want to name that.
My name is Elizabeth Poivert, and I have a building on the alleyway, 163 D Street. It's where my office is. And I do have a couple questions. Number one, will the alleyway be paved? Because I literally just filled holes myself with gravel because I want to keep those using it. I'm just trying to maintain it as best I can. So obviously with this increased traffic, it would be nice to confirm that it's going to be paved. So that the people that are living on the alley aren't responsible so much for the maintenance.
That would probably be a site review
That is
question.
a site design review question. Typically, what we do for frontage improvements is they only extend the length of the property. So we would anticipate that the alley is going to get paved the length of the property.
Okay, so just a portion of the alley then,
Yeah.
half of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it gonna be one way? It's a pretty narrow alleyway, and so that should be.
That's a Fred question.
I think that's
I don't think the alleys are one way anywhere, are they?
There is one actually on 8th Street.
I think that is something that we've definitely considered as ultimately a public works decision, but I think that that's probably what's going to happen. I think that it's a public works decision. I think ultimately.
The reason why I ask is because it is a fairly narrow alley, and so once you have this amount of people parking coming in and out, there's not a lot of ways for you to get around one car that's already in the alley. It would just make sense to at least think about that as you're finishing up items. And then the third thing is our sewer lines run. There's a few of us here that have properties on the alleyway, and our sewer lines are in the alley. They start at the north side and then they run south. And so if you consider the added traffic and then paving and the things that are going to take place, is there anything to protect the people that have that sewer line in the alley?
I guess I don't know that answer. That's again a public works question. So I'm not certain what happens if the sewer line breaks in a public alley.
So I live on an alleyway too, and our sewers connect to the main line. That's city responsibility if there's a problem with the line. That's
Where it can, their responsibility where it connects and then to.
right from the
Yeah.
connection to the house.
Just the additional traffic though, and then paving a portion of it, especially if you know Independence history and how old a lot of those sewer lines are. Coming from a real estate standpoint, I'm very well aware of the problems that we have with our sewer lines. So it was just an additional question that I had that I would love to have considered.
It doesn't have anything to do with historic preservation, but do you know how deep the sewer line is?
I would have to go back to some notes and so, excuse me if this wasn't the place to bring this to light. I had questions.
I think the staff can take your concerns to Public Works.
Okay,
So when we had our main re-plumbed, it was 6 feet down in
8
our
feet.
backyard.
That's the way mine is too. It's like 8 feet down, and
which isn't very deep.
I doubt that you could run the traffic that those, I'm not an engineer, but I highly suspect that there's no way that the traffic from that new building would cause any problems with compaction that far down.
And then, of course, the storm drains and all that, I know is considered when a new building is being built. And do they connect with that same sewer line?
No, storm drains are a separate thing. Typically, you want to keep those separate from sanitary sewer. Because if you don't, you get what's called, they're a big problem. CSOs, combined sewer overflows. And so what happens is stormwater will inundate a sewer system, and then big cities and whatnot will just end up bypassing their treatment plant, discharge raw sewage into like a river. So yeah, you don't want to connect those two things.
Well, I'm glad someone's thinking about stuff like that. So thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you. And we have John Flores.
Disclose things? Kurt, do we have to like disclose things like he's my husband?
Disclose.
Yeah.
Well, he can do it.
I can disclose that. So, this is Jennifer Flores, in case anyone's wondering, she's my wife, so. And I'm just here to make a quick statement. I understand that change must happen. It's unavoidable and necessary, and without it, we run the risk of stagnation. A building this size with its commercial business purposes next door to my home quite literally makes us wary and makes my wife want to cry sometimes, but Mr. Harris has been nothing but respectful and considerate to his neighbors during this project. We know he's required to adhere to historical code, thankfully, but he has zero requirements to converse and cooperate with us, yet he has from the start. Brad's building is quite large, and as far as I'm concerned, doesn't belong next to a single-family home. However, 20 or 40 years ago, the powers that be deemed this block MUPC. So if I have to be next to a business, at least for now, it's someone who still understands courtesy and community. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any opposed? There's no opposed, so I don't think there's any need for rebuttal testimony. Are there any further questions from commission members?
No.
If there are no objections, the hearing record is closed. And would anyone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the slight changes with the exceptions to the balconies and the shingles. Oh, do we have to read a certain thing? What page is it on? Good, thank you.
And after this, just mention the
changes.
things that the shingles, the knee wall on the
On the porch.
side entrance.
That's the porch. Okay. I move to approve the historic appropriateness updated application file number CA-2020-08, adopting findings, conditions, and staff recommendations as provided in the staff report with noted exceptions to the balconies in front being rendered as the primary proposal, not the 3D rendering. The shingles be put back on like the primary or like the first rendering, and that the porch on the south elevation be larger to Fred's specifications. Good enough? Okay.
We have a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second discussion. I do want to mention, I really appreciate the time and effort that staff put into this. And those were really good points as far as keeping the, breaking up the visual flatness on both the back and the side. With that said, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you very much. So we're at the preservation award discussion.
Yeah, and I meant to bring it down. We are going to be presenting the Historic Preservation Award at the next council meeting. did shoot a very nice video with Paul Ryder, which turned out really, really cool. And the awards look really nice too. Should I go grab them real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, hold on 1 second. And everybody, you can either leave or talk amongst yourselves.
Karen, what's the date for the next council meeting?
The next council meeting is October 25th.
City, oh, I don't. Today's the 17th, so.
He's the one in the gray house, right?
25th is Tuesday.
The person who's talking about, that's the man in the gray house.
So, yeah.
I met him a couple days ago. I was walking the dog and
Hi.
his dog got loose and it had the address on the collar.
The one on 4th Street, right?
I'm
By
sorry.
Mortuary, that gray house?
Yeah, and the dog got loose and so,
I don't.
You're hugging your dog.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
it was a friendly dog. You could tell it was still had the leash where they clipped it somewhere and
Uh-huh.
Probably check with the post office.
Here you go.
oh, thank you. He was expecting a little bit more pain on that.
Oh, I have no idea.
Calling in instead of being here. She's usually there all the time.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Reading and. So bad it is. I know.
I can tell you really enjoyed this part.
Oh, they're beautiful. It's just such a beautiful award, right?
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yeah, just hand painted glass. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
The guy that.
Mike's to attend since his name's on.
Now, if he's watching the Zoom meeting, you know, he saw it.
He's gonna know that, well, we definitely talked to him and then here's the other one.
Oh, that's nice too. Yeah.
right? Just very nicely done.
Yeah, that was a huge improvement on that, especially that side of the block.
By the way, how is Mike?
I'm sorry.
How is Mike?
He was not feeling well. We talked to Gail just for a second.
So now the meeting with the Independence Planning Commission, and then we're done.
Yep, and then, so we're gonna try and schedule a time to meet with the Independence Planning Commission. We'll let you know when exactly that date is. I don't know if it's gonna be, I don't think it's gonna be at their November meeting. I think I'd like it to be more of a broader discussion and just trying to figure out what exactly should be included in that discussion. So, maybe talking strategies, you know, maybe some. I don't know, so we'll. Still.
Probably with the holidays, we're probably looking after the first, aren't we?
Maybe early December.
Okay.
Or maybe, yeah. yeah.
Well, are you saying, Fred, that we're maybe just going to have like a work session as opposed to, you know, a real meeting? Because maybe we could just, if we just have a session, we could do it before the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I would like to do. I'm just trying to figure out what should exactly be on that agenda, so it's not just coming together for.
Do you need to ask us any questions as far as availability, like what time of day are you looking at?
I'd really like to have it before,
5:30.
in earlier November than latter November. Is there any way we can do that?
Earlier November, yeah, I think that I can try, I could shoot for, is mid-November early?
Well, no, the end of. No,
No, she said the mid.
I know
Right.
that earlier, early part of November, the,
Like the 7th, 8th, or the 9th, or something like that? Is that what you're thinking of?
7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th.
Definitely not
December.
before the 7th, 8th, or 9th,
Yeah.
because I know probably headed out of town that week.
Okay. So I'll look at some dates, keeping that in mind, and trying to fill out a decent agenda for us to be talking from, so. Yeah, I am working on it, I just haven't had much time to think about what that meeting will look like yet.
Well, aren't we going to talk about the new changes because the fact that we're over 10,000 people now?
That would be a good thing to talk about, yeah.
I mean, you know, so we get it too, but what they feel they're going to do about it, so we kind of know too.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because
Okay.
aren't there a whole bunch of other things that now apply to us that we're now 10,000, over 10,000 people population
Yep, a number of things.
as
apply.
regards to zoning and overlays and all that stuff?
Yep, that's right.
Well, okay, let's talk about that.
Sounds good.
And maybe we could just have coffee in the cafeteria or something instead of a heavy-duty meeting. How would that be?
Nice.
And some
Or
donuts.
has anybody noticed that, what is it, Gilgamesh, they've got that whole thing built? You know, we could have a meeting back there.
You have coffee, I'll have something else.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sure they'd serve anything you wanted.
Okay, anything?
So how about that, Fred? What do you think about that idea?
I think that we can do something like that, right? Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other
Our meeting over?
meetings adjourned? Look at that, we did it in less than an hour this time.
All right.
Well, good. Okay. Well, I'll say goodbye.